the Within Orb podcast. Come get Within Orb. Hello, my name is Jenn Zart, and welcome to Within Orb, a production of the Celestial Arts Education Library, a podcast bringing people together around the love of astrology, books. Join me as I interview people about the astrology books that changed their life and practice. You can support the podcast at withinorb.com. Hey, Taylor, welcome to the third episode of Within Orb. I'm so glad that you're here and welcome.
Thank you, Jenn. I'm thrilled to be here and I'm thrilled to be your third or so guest. I'm like, this is awesome. I'm so excited for your new podcast.
You said you were a digital nomad as we were prepping for today. Where are you right now?
Yeah, so I'm in Tucson, Arizona at the moment in my landing, we call it, which they've got an app and stuff. And I've got links on my profile and whatnot. If folks are interested in landings, they've got places all over the country. So I can go wherever I want, pretty much whenever I want, which is awesome. It's like the gig economy for living.
And that's afforded to you because you're a pro astrologer.
And because I have a really supportive day job right now as a consultant. And I like to be transparent about that because I don't want people to think you can just go from 0 to 100 or 0 to 1,000 and just like jump into a new career. For most people, that's not something that can happen.
I really appreciate that transparency. And also then the next question would be, as a digital nomad, how do you take books with you?
Yeah. So I feel like I have more books than a nomad should have, but I have way fewer than a good astrologer should have. And also I do feel good because it means that you have to really pick the books that mean the most to you that you're going to use. So I have a tiny house back in upstate New York. That's sort of like my home ground. And all of my books are boxed up there. So I've got like 21 boxes back there that I need to ship. So I actually use a lot of different things. So I use like the Kindle app. I have Scribed. I have a number of digital resources that really support me and help me to keep my books. And so a lot of my stuff is actually digital.
That's amazing too. Yeah. Moving into CAELi, we've had 350 boxes of books to unpack and counting. And there's some that probably not even that number is not yet correct. So, and it was nice to think like here at this library, there's a permanent home because like you for a long time during the sort of 2013 to 2020, I was also a digital nomad. And so I'm like living vicariously through your ability to do that right now.
Yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sort of like, I'm wanting to put some roots down and I really love Tucson, but I'm super curious, like if you can share with folks, like what CAELi has to offer, because like I said, I have like Kindle and I have PDFs and I have Scribed and I have Audible. And also because I am neurodivergent, I find it really helpful to have like an audio version and a PDF version and like a tangible material version. Like what can we get?
So the digital offerings are going to be on a rollout basis based off of member requests. So when you say, okay, I really need a chapter from this book, and we check the copyright always, so every request has to go through a copyright check, then we would create a digital PDF for you to access through the member portal. And if you need a bunch of materials, you basically just re-up on points and requests, and you can just get what you need to get for your research. But the collection is non-circulating, meaning if you do take the time in your nomadic life to come to Olympia, every single thing is here. It's not being checked out by someone and it won't be coming back for 3 weeks and you only have these 3 weeks. So the intention is to create, when I was in German studies at UC Berkeley, getting my PhD, we had this seminar bibliothèque that was basically non-circulating so that at any hour of the day, we all had 24-hour access to the building. We could go there and look up what we might need to study. And it was really a nice resource because you knew that no one would take any books out of that library. So I thought, there's not many places in the world that have this kind of astrological collection. Oftentimes it's mixed with metaphysical books. And so the idea that you could kind of create a ninth house pilgrimage to here and see everything together.
I just got chills because I was thinking that same thing. I was like, I want to do a retreat there, like just go on pilgrimage and like bask in the smell of the old pages.
And also just see the different book covers. I mean, we have, everybody's got a copy of Liz Green, but she was reprinted so many different times. The covers have changed through the years, so you can see certain kinds of trends.
Art exhibit.
Yeah, right. And that's going to be our TikTok reels, is all the covers and things like that.
I love that.
As we go. But enough about me and CAELi. I would love to learn, first and foremost, what was the entry point for you of astrology in your life? via books. What was the first book that really kind of opened your eyes to the idea that the stars create meaning?
So I'll give a little bit of preference. So my mom was super woo-woo, grew up in New York City. She grew up in Long Island, born in the 50s. So in the 60s, 70s, she's going into New York City all the time. There's this woman I want to say it was like, I forget what hotel it was, but it was a hotel in Central Park. And she gave readings. She was a clairaudient, clairsentient, all these clairs. And she told my mom, like, she had to like keep her feet on the ground because people were going to see her floating away. Now, I didn't really know this growing up. Like, I had like somewhat of a sense because I read the horoscope column, like in the paper, like New York Times or Cosmo magazine, whatever. But going to I went to Costco one day with my parents, and there was this book, The Secret Language of Birthdays. And I just saw like the artwork on the cover, and I begged my mom and I was like, please. And that was like the first entry point. Cause I was like, this is like, it's got my birthday and this is apparently who I am or who I'm supposed to be. But I also like didn't get it. I didn't get it at all.
When you read the description for yourself, did it land though?
No.
Like, were you like, oh, this is me? No, it didn't.
No, I was just, cause I was so young. I was like, I don't see it. I don't get it. And then I was still into astrology. And honestly, when I read sun sign columns as a young person, I could not pick up on the patterns at all. Not at all. And then my friends told me I was gullible. So I walked away from astrology. I went to Catholic school. And then around the time of my Saturn return, I worked with a friend of mine named Michael, and he was like, do you know this website? It's sln.me. And I was like, no. And I look it up. Sure enough, The Secret Language of Birthdays was turned into a website. And I think it was him or someone else, because I started and then it was just the rabbit hole, and found Chani, and then found Ann Ortley, found Chris Brennan, found Astrology Hub. And
you were in.
I was in. And a couple of good eclipses just sort of like got me roped back in, and it was very quick. And then the pandemic happened, and I ended up learning astrology actually by listening. So a friend of mine, an amazing astrologer, Lisa Warman, she comments a lot. She's like, Taylor, I see you. And if you spend enough time with me, you see like my eyes go kind of all over the place. If someone tells me their birthday, I go, oh, you've got Saturn in Virgo. And then those are here. Yeah. And it's not, I don't want to compare myself to Nick Campion at all. People call him like the
Nick Dagan Best. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Nick Dagan Best, the walking ephemeris. I'm not like that. But once I start remembering things, I start calculating in my head because I listen to podcasts, I listen to YouTube videos, and I had to paint a picture in my head of what a chart looked like. Yeah. And I had to start just sort of like remembering things.
Imagining it because you were hearing it. You weren't actually like seeing videos or reading books about it.
I mean, I did. I'd like go back to it later. But like if I'm in the shower or driving or like doing my dishes, it was like too small. And I was just like, well, let me just imagine it.
Yeah. I think it's awesome that you actually have like internalized, embodied that pattern system from the ephemeris inside you so that when you are like doing the interpretations, it's just coming from the inside out.
Yeah. And then it's just divination. How it happens is you get the same patterns repeating over and over because of what's going on in your own life or whatever, for whatever reason.
Very cool. So it sounds like there's a lot of oral transmission that's important for you. But if you had to pick books that changed the way that you practice your astrology, which books do you think you would pick?
So Postcolonial Astrology, which is always a top for me.
Yeah.
Alice Sparkly Cat. This was like a game changer for me because, first of all, like beautifully written. The research, the approach just takes you into a new place. And so it's post-colonial. It gives a treatment of capitalism. It gives a treatment of patriarchy. Also gives a treatment of like ancient times, like putting it in context. I grew up going to, I would call them progressive Catholic schools in New York City, where we actually learned about the Bible, like as a historical document. Like, what were the shepherds like? What was their life like? And Alice Sparkly Cat does that as well, where it's like, okay, we're talking about Saturn. What was Saturn like? What was life like for people at that time? If we're talking about the sun, what does the sun do in capitalism? It shines a light. And what happened when light came in? People couldn't be in secret anymore. And what happened when privacy was violated? So reframing our current understanding of the past by putting things in their proper context and then pulling them forward again to say, okay, now let's reset and look at it in a new light is just, it's sort of like mic drop.
Yeah. And I love the way that in this specific text, there's an ownership of how difficult it can be to read if you've never thought critically about these systems of oppression.
Yeah.
Because the language itself really does, like on the sentence level, worm its way inside your mind to break apart these kind of like structures that have been assumed. There's this assumption that this is what the sun means. And it's like, is it?
Totally. The assumption, just breaking it up.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever taken what's presented in postcolonial astrology into the consultation context? Like, has it helped you in the way that you work with people one-on-one?
I would say from time to time, if I get clients where it's relevant for them, I would say certainly early in my practice, which I'm still early in my practice, let's be honest. Like I founded my business in 2020. So I've been doing this about 3 years on a professional level. But certainly 2020, 2021, because of the context of what was going on in the world, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, et cetera, which is still going on today, but it was more heightened then. I would say it was more relevant. I'm finding as I get more out into the quote unquote mainstream, the clients that are coming in aren't in that sphere. Mm-hmm. I do bring it into my teaching. So I just did a class for Nadia Shah and Synchronicity University on Saturn and Pisces. And so I did use that as one of my sources and pass that on to the students in that vehicle.
I love that. Yeah, I feel like that book is going to be changing a lot of our practice going forward as more people read it and really work with what is put forward there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one book. You have a couple more. Like I've said in the past, like, what would you take to a desert island? But I'm thinking also about just impact, like the ones that kind of stick with you that you would want to take with you as you go around the country.
Yeah. So the second one is going to be The Venus Star Point by Arielle Guttman. She's got 2 books. Well, she's got more than 2 books. The Venus Star Rising, which gives more of an historical context, but the Venus Star Point book specifically, I think is like a more cut down, almost cookbook version, mm-hmm. where it lists the dates of the Venus Star Points and then gives, this is what happened during the last Venus Star Point phase and what was going on in the zeitgeist. And so you internalize that as, on an individual level. And I think it gives such a beautiful color to a consultation because there's so much fear around astrology. There's fear for clients who are new to astrology. And when I'm in a session with someone, I want to do a couple things. I want to give them something that they may not have gotten elsewhere. I want to empower them. I want to help them know that astrology is a tool for them to thrive in their life. And by them thriving, they are breaking the systems of oppression and whatnot and making the world a better place.
I just recently listened to your podcast episode with Sam Reynolds, which everybody should go and listen to right now. Just pause right now and go listen to that. The way that you talk about wealth and plenty and like when you break these systems and you kind of like tune into like resourcing things properly and the feeling of plenty that comes from that Sam was saying, like, that's like actually maybe like the heart of what the experience of wealth is that resourcing. And wanted to know if you wanted to say more about that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot about, especially with Saturn going into Pisces and Neptune in Pisces about, thoughts become things or whatever you want to say, your vibration becomes what you attract. I am more and more becoming a believer of that. And I hear that, some people have charts where that's not true. Some people have life experiences where that's not true. I think that there is an immense amount of abundance all around us, but unfortunately we live in capitalist patriarchal systems that are based on scarcity, and therefore it's just counter to the current system. And astrology is a tool, one of many divinatory tools that was taken, stolen, beaten out of us, literally, so that we would not reclaim our own power. And that's one of the reasons why I love astrology. I love to reclaim it. I feel so empowered to be in this life, in this body, in this day and age, because there is no other time historically when I could have been me and been very public about witchcraft.
Yeah.
Like it's amazing.
Wait, you're a witch too?
So yeah, I mean, who's not? Like,
It's not the first occult thing I would own because I'm definitely identifying as an astrologer. So I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I mean, I wouldn't be like a witch teacher at this point or anything, but yeah, I feel like if you're doing anything divinatory and like you're using the energies, I would count that as witchcraft personally.
Plus the permaculture angle. which is something that you're very passionate about.
Yeah. So permaculture, it's all about nature. And I think that a manipulation or an understanding of nature is essentially my definition of witchcraft. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's what witches did. They looked around and they were like, oh, the wind is blowing, the sun is like this, there's going to be a flood, let's prepare, let's do some preparations, like make it different. And that's essentially what permaculture is. It's essentially what astrology is. And so I like to blend the two and say, let's use this thinking framework, this design framework that is permaculture. It has 3 ethics: people care, fair share, earth care, in order to use these 12 principles, like observe and interact. And I'm forgetting all of the rest of them at the moment.
It's okay. It's like the 7 dwarves, right? You can never remember them all. But there's 12. I mean, was that intentional by the people who developed the systems of permaculture?
You know, it's interesting. I haven't read anything that I can recall at this moment where they talked about the number 3 and the number 12. But it just speaks to the fact that 12 is such an archetypal, like human number that we hold on to so deeply. Although 13, it really should be 13.
I was going to say, and then going back to the Venus star point, let's break that down a little bit for people who don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. Like, I love rushing headlong into a super complex conversation, but I also love what Arielle's talking about. So I want to sort of unpack it for us.
Yeah. So the Venus star point is when Venus and the sun are conjunct in the sky. And we get a new Venus star point every 9.5 months or so. And it's either going to be retrograde or direct, and it's going to be an evening star or a morning star. And it happens in one of 5 different signs at any given time, which creates the shape of a star. For example, we had a Venus star point in Libra last time. That was in October 22nd, I believe, of 2022. And now we're going to have a Venus star point in Leo. And I think before the Libra one, it was in Capricorn, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And we actually are in this really interesting period where we're shifting. The Venus star point, I think for every sign, lasts about 100 years. Mm-hmm. We get the star point every 4 years in any given sign. Is that right?
It does sort of recess through the sign. I was going to actually ask you about what you thought about the October 2022 Venus star point being in Libra for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
Because of the way that it slipped back.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. You know, Arielle Guttman talks about how the Venus star point moving from Scorpio into Libra, one of the things that happened was fuel, right? So we had petroleum that fueled cars, and now Libra's an air sign. And so we're moving more into like electric energy, the Tesla sort of thing. And so we're seeing that. I actually have an episode of my podcast that I talked about Venus with Louise Eddington, who is certified in the Venus star point. I'm not certified yet. But yeah, I think one of the things Venus is about, it's like relationships. It's how we love. It's what we love. It's who we love. It's why we love. And the color of the Venus star point for someone, you know, like when I can just talk to a Gemini Venus star point and say, you're supposed to bring more laughter to the world. It's just a lovely way to end a consultation, honestly, you know?
Do they melt a little when you say that? Like, oh, you see me, like I have permission to do that. Like that's actually my mandate.
Yeah, I think giving permission, validation, and inspiring and encouraging people is like one of the most beautiful things. Such an honor and a privilege to be in consultation with people. Yeah.
Astrology in the 21st century is more exciting than it's been in centuries, with revival of ancient, classical, Renaissance, medieval, and 20th century techniques, all bringing 21st century astrology into the most powerful system ever seen. But where do you begin to learn how to practice such a powerful system? I'm Rod Suskin, a professional astrologer with over 30 years experience. Come learn with me at the Rod Suskin School of Astrology, an all-online 3-year diploma, intense, exciting, and stimulating. Learn how to marry the best of the ancient techniques with the most powerful modern techniques to give clients an accurate, insightful reading. Visit rodsuskin.com for more information.
Cool. Okay. So we've got Postcolonial Astrology, the Venus Star Point from Arielle Guttman, Alice Sparkley Katz's Postcolonial Astrology. So what would be like the next books that really changed your view of astrology and practice?
Yeah, so I'm cheating a little bit. I can't pick just one, but it is the Elements series by Steven Forrest. So the Book of Air, the Book of Water, the Book of Fire, the Book of Earth. And I have them all on Audible because the person who reads them is the cadence of his voice sounds a lot like Steven.
Oh,
which is really cool. It's clearly not Steven's voice, but this person does such a great spot on impression that you can hear Steven's voice come through so beautifully.
wow.
And there's certain chapters in it, like he talks about the clan. So it's like the Aquarius clan or the Capricorn clan. And so he'll talk about like Saturn, and he'll talk about Capricorn, and he'll talk about the 10th house. And every one of those chapters runs for a little bit over an hour. And then I'll also go into like every planet and every sign in these books as well. And for me, what I love about it is not only being able to listen to it because I'm neurodivergent and I'm on the go constantly and I'm multitasking, but also it feels for me like it's not a conversation quite, but it always jogs my mind. It gets my gears turning where I might not agree with everything he has to say, but he's such a great storyteller that I end up having a ton of ideas of my own after listening to this like fertile soil, this just beautiful foundation and exploration. That's not fair to say. I mean, it's a monumental work. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. I have the first one here. So we don't actually have yet the other three in the library. We're going to make a wish list sometime and be like, hey, if we need to bolster our collection. But I believe these are published very recently. Yeah.
Yeah.
2019 came in the first one.
Yeah. And I've got the air and the water here.
See, oh, it's like, oh, we have an elemental void in Earth. Look at that.
Me too. I know I have Earth on my Kindle.
There we go. So this is like a culmination of his entire career, actually, right? Like, I mean, the ability to distill stories like that. I mean, this is not an immense book. It's just potent.
I love it. Anytime I'm doing a horoscope for the future and I'm like, I get kind of stuck, I just throw it on and listen for an hour while I like I'm in the shower getting ready. And then I'm like, ready to go. Got ideas now.
Yeah, right. And it's cool that it unlocks that for you because I feel like there's a lot of people similar to me who practice more traditional methods. And it's like, what if we like pivot for a second, park what we know to be our normal standard of practice with traditional things, and then allow ourselves to be the recipients of these stories and see what else can come out from that vantage point.
Yeah. And so what you bring up is, you know, I didn't quite say what kind of astrologer I am, but I like to say that I take a liberal arts approach to astrology because I really learned first through Chris Brennan. I'm sorry, Chris, take your class. I'd love to, but I just, I couldn't at the time, and have the book and listen to the podcast and watch hundreds of his episodes. So really learned there, and also through Chani. And so learned a lot of Hellenistic and Demetra as well. And then got into evolutionary, actually read shamanic astrology after I got back into astrology. And so just blending all of these different things. I even switched between house systems, which I feel like you should switch between house systems.
I call that the open house system.
You know, and what you said, and I forget if it was Norwalk or somewhere else, you might remember, or maybe it was just like on a podcast, you said that the difference between whole sign and the other quadrant systems is the difference between how I see myself and how other people see me. And the space between the two is known as pain.
Yeah.
And that just like stuck with me.
Have you seen it help your clients?
1,000%. And so I do what Gemini Brett does. Basically, I say like, you know, this is the 5th sign, but it's a 3rd house.
Yeah.
And framing it for people in that way when they're like, no, you know, Mars is retrograde in Gemini in my 4th house. I haven't had blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, what if it's really like, let's look at it like this? And they go, yeah.
Yeah, it can really liberate people's perspectives because I feel like that's an astrological way of what I think life coaches do because they're like, look at the possibilities, except we have a lot of tangible words to attach to that because of how we can see the lay of the land with astrology, right? The permaculture, as you say, of their chart. Mm-hmm. You're like, what about this water feature? And think about this, you know, hill.
Yeah. And just to say to someone, you know, I can see that other people probably think X about you. And so when you're trying to do Y, this is what's going on. They feel so seen. So it's just a special space to be in.
That's very cool. I'm glad that you blend all of that together and that you say, I've never heard anyone say this before, but I think I might even adopt it. But this idea of like a liberal arts approach to astrology, which, you know, is oftentimes self-taught or not thought about in relationship to academia. Like, I love that.
Yeah. You know, that's another interesting thing that I feel newer, younger astrologers struggle with sometimes too, is like, do I say I'm self-taught? And I'm like, someone told me, they were like, oh, call it independent study. And I was like, yeah,
That's rad.
I have done independent study.
Yeah. I was thinking of, as CAELi builds out, of bringing kind of like interdisciplinary classes to the table. And it's more for the love of it. No certifications or anything like that, but just like we're planning right now with some people who are living in Olympia. We have an archivist named Alex, and they're planning to make an ecology and astrology summit where we're going to talk about like bioregional animism and astrology of this area and all of the ways in which astrology and Cascadia have interfaced. And it's like, I don't see anyone really doing that. Let's just get to the 404 level right away. If you're ready for that, here you come, and there's a lot of places now, especially with podcasts and Zoom and everything, that anyone can learn the basics. And it's like, when you're ready for the next thing, then let's play,
Yeah, 100%. That sounds awesome. I'm going to need to just eat all that up.
Yeah. Well, I'm like hungry for your permaculture perspective, because I just love, when I heard that the first time, I was like, oh my God, this is so ready for this. Also, like Uranus conjunct the North Node in Taurus, like we're ready for a different kind of embodiment of this knowledge.
Yes, absolutely. The Uranus in Taurus makes a lot of sense for the permaculture and bringing astrology into permaculture. I've got Uranus out of bounds on my midheaven, so that I think that also kind of makes sense of how that connects to today. But yeah, I'm doing a talk at NORWAC, tentatively titled like Ikigai, finding like your purpose, your passion, your profession. And then there's a fourth thing. And at the same time, I bring permaculture into everything, because I feel like if we can flow naturally, then you can really do whatever you want to do and figure out what is meant for you and what's supportive for you.
Yeah. And just for those who don't know what NORWAC is the Northwest Astrological Conference that was born in Cascadia by the Nalbandian family, Maggie Nalbandian, and has been going nonstop since it was founded about 33 years ago. It's been around for quite some time, uninterrupted. And a lot of CAELi's lineage comes from the Nalbandian family as well. So You are coming to an astrology conference in May. It's always in Labor Day weekend. So I hope everyone comes to see your talk.
Yeah. And I think they're also doing it for the first time hybrid. So you can do online or in person, but we'd love to see you in person.
Yeah, embody.
Yeah. Yes.
And I like to kind of wrap up the conversation. We've spoken about a lot of books, but I'm wondering, and you've also said podcasts, which isn't quite books. Like that, I'm going to have to think about that in the context of CAELi. Like, how do we like capture that here? But I mean, they're distributed everywhere. But if you were going to advise a student about getting themselves into astrology as angled towards being a professional, not necessarily just learning about it just for its own sake, but just kind of giving an advice of like, what books do you think they should read to up-level their experience of astrology?
Okay, so if you're like not past the level of a cookbook, you're like, I'm not even sure what a sun, moon, or rising or an ascendant is. Like, you were born for this, Chani Nicholas, like Demetra George, astrology for yourself. Those are great. If you're at that next level and you're like, I got it, I'm trying to learn, there's a lot. There's a lot. Some that I really like. Okay. The Archetypal Universe by Renn Butler, because it combines 2 or 3 planets together. And so you can start to like get your mind going about what does it mean when I combine planets? Like if I'm combining them in a square, or I'm combining them in a trine or a sextile, an opposition, a conjunction. Cosmos and Psyche by Richard Tarnas is a classic to get you thinking on a mundane level about how the planets work in our society. Ancient Astrology, Volume 1 and 2 by Demetra George. I love Eclipses in You by Judith Hale. Andre Barbeau, Planetary Cycles. I think that's what it's called.
So Andre Barbeau is a mundane astrologer. So you're sending people off into the world of mundane.
Yeah, because I think that we should really take astrology and do something with it. Not just it's great to do personality with it. It's great to do timing in my life. When am I going to find love? How much money will I make? How can I make money? How can I be a better person? What's wrong with my spouse? Why are they so mean to me? Like, how do I care for my children? Like, that's all lovely and nice. But the whole point of why it was like stolen from us and hidden, and why we're reclaiming it right now, is because the power that it has to change the world. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Andre Barbeau, and he talks about all of the planetary outer planets.
Synodic cycles.
The synodic cycles, thank you.
Yeah.
But also we've got Saturn, Neptune coming up, and how that he says it's the start of beautiful time. And that's pretty cool to think about, because most people don't say that. Most people are kind of terrified when they look at the future, astrologers. And I like to lean more into a utopian angle and say, how can we make the world a better place with astrology?
Yeah, and the Venus star point work from Arielle also taps into that mundane approach. I was looking at page 212 of the Venus star rising book that we have here, and she was saying that because we have the Venus star point changing into signs that Venus loves, Taurus, Pisces, Libra, basically by 2076, we're going to be living in this really sweet time. I won't be alive. I'll be like 100 something. But, it's like as we approach, like it just kicked off and we're beginning to see Venus take over in terms of these, away from Mars, like get away from Aries, get away from Scorpio. We're going into this Taurus, Libra.
I love that. Although I have to say, like Venus and Pisces, I'm becoming more skeptical of it as like a beautiful Venus thing.
Why?
Well, Pisces and Libra are in Antisha. And so I think there actually is some comparison there with boundarylessness or indecision.
They both have scales.
Yeah.
Fish scales.
They do both have scales. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think people misunderstand also sometimes the problems of exaltation. Like it's seen as this great thing for a talisman, but sometimes having it as a natal placement can be a detriment.
Exactly, because you need to make a choice. If we're going to actually make the world a better place, you need to make a choice to make the world a better place. Venus and Pisces is not always going to make a decision because it's just happy with things as they are.
Yeah. It's connecting to everything, even things that might not be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I take and I appreciate and I like your point that we're moving into a more beautiful era and I'll take it.
Yeah. And also rulerships. Yes. So you got Rex and you got Lee.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Rulership Book by Rex Bills. And then this is the Book of Rulerships. These titles, right? By Lee Lehman. I love Lee's book on that because, well, I'm talking about your books, but the way in which there's sources to the older texts.
Yeah. And I love comparing them. So I was talking about I had a little chat with Nadia Shah about Saturn and Pisces, and I had just gotten an email from Alan Ellenboss about his wife and listened to her podcast about pine needles and grief. And then I was like, comparing them. And Saturn is trees and Saturn is pine needles. And I forget exactly what I found. And I wrote a really lovely paragraph on it and responded to an intelligent question on the YouTube video, and YouTube deleted it. So I don't remember what I said.
Oh, no.
But it's super fun to look and just compare what they say because sometimes they oppose one another.
Right.
And sometimes.
Yeah, because in my understanding with evergreen trees, that's very leonine, even though it's a tree.
Yeah.
Because the heart always beats, the sun always shines. So,
ooh.
And then you think of the citrus, the vitamin C in a pine needle. So I love that. The grief component, because there's that Saturn sun, dynamic.
Yeah. And because pine needles open up the lungs in traditional Chinese medicine. Oh. And that's why we have them at Christmas time, because Christmas time, grief and joy go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And because so many people are sad and depressed around Christmas time, and many people pass away, unfortunately, especially during the holidays. And so we have the grief there. And then there was this whole thing on Instagram with the Today Show going to Al Roker's house to sing him Christmas carols, and they cried. So they're singing Christmas carols and crying because they miss him. It was joy and grief going hand in hand. And what do we have in the background of it? A pine tree to help support the joy, bringing the grief out of our lungs so that we can move on. And with Saturn going into Pisces, I think that that's important for us to do, is create containers for our grief so that we can come together.
Amazing. So what's up on the horizon for you before we say goodbye? What do you got going on?
Oh my gosh, so much. Well, first of all, my books are open. So if you're interested in a consultation with me, I do consultations. I've also partnered with the Astrology Hub on their new Astrologer Connect platform. And I know you've worked with Astrology Hub too before. Awesome. They're wonderful. I'm doing a talk with the Organization for Professional Astrology on February 19th about the history of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and the Divine Nine with Omari Martin. I'm also doing a talk for OPA on April 22nd. They're doing a mini online conference, and that will be about permaculture and astrology, which I'm super excited about. I am going to be speaking on March 10th at the San Diego Astrology Society. That's Friday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. I think it's in person only. So if you're in San Diego, it'll be my first time there. I'll be excited to meet you in person. And I'm speaking at NORWAC on Labor Day weekend, my first NORWAC talk, which I'm just super thrilled about.
Oh man, you have so many things going on, but I'm so excited to hear that you're going to be breaking into the NORWAC speaking circuit because it's such a family. It's like, you go to that conference and it's cozy and very like, welcome to the family.
Oh, thank you. And it's just like a dream come true for me to be like talking with you and talking with other astrologers when I was just like a viewer and I was learning these things. And I'm like, I get to talk to these people now. It's so exciting. And I get to teach and I get to do these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think your liberal arts approach and just all that you bring to the table has just added so much to the community conversation. And so I'm just really happy that you're here doing what you do.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And I've got some other things coming up. So if folks want to sign up for my newsletter at taylorshuler.com, Shuler's Shuler, I'd love to have you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking time to talk about books with me.
Thank you so much, Jenn. It was such a privilege. I'm so grateful.
See you too.
All right.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Within Orb. To learn more about the Celestial Arts Education Library, or to become a member, visit our website at CAELi.institute. That's www.caeli.institute. If you enjoyed this episode, please help spread the word. Follow or subscribe to Within Orb in your podcatcher of choice, rate it 5 stars, or write us a happy review. This helps others find the show. We also want to give a big thanks to the indie band The E-Block for contributing their song Wake Up for our intro and outro music. You can find them at their website, eblockband.com. This is Jen's Art, signing off for now. See you next time.